We're now live on YouTube with the July 14th edition of the OpenJS Foundation Standards Working Group. Jory Burson, would you like to take it from here as our honorary not chair?
Sure, since that's my chore on the chore wheel this week. I am just going to ask really quickly if there's any announcements for today. Usually the announcements are about other meetings that are happening today, but we're out of meetings today. There are some.
One.
Oh, go ahead, Miles.
Next week is TC39. The agenda for stage advancement is now locked. We did not end up doing any sort of pre-meeting or anything this time. I think it was more just a timing thing. But I'd like to encourage folks from the foundation, if they're watching, and not the foundation as well, if you're interested, github.com/tc39/agendas. You can see the agenda. You can go through and see all the things that are up for stage advancement as well as for discussion. And if you have concerns about particular proposals, we have various folks from the foundation who will be participating. So feel free to, as a start, open an issue in the standards repo to have a discussion about it.
Great announcement, very timely. We also have a couple of other foundation meetings that are happening this week and early next. So Joe has open office hours on Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern. So that's the 4 o'clock UTC, I think. And then we also have the marketing meeting next Tuesday. So for folks who may be interested in participating in OpenJS Foundation marketing, that's coming up next week. Related to our standards communities though, we have upcoming votes to cast for W3C process and patent revision. So if you have any thoughts or comments on those documents, send them to Brian Cardell, our AC rep.
Yes, send them to me.
Yeah, and I think that's the bulk of it. TC53 is meeting tomorrow for a teleconference. That's not super public, but I think Donovan and myself will be on that call. And that's all of the standards meetings that I know of that are coming up in the next couple weeks.
Maybe we can throw into that the EPUB 3. If there's a charter, a proposed charter for EPUB 3, if you have questions or comments, send them to me. I think EPUB is interesting. It's an interesting thing that was not developed in the W3C. It was developed in the IDPF, which later merged with W3C. And it is a complex set of technologies that is like sort of above the web. It uses a lot of web technologies. And it's part of like a multi-billion-dollar industry. There is a big desire to align it with the web. And so they have kind of carefully written a charter. But I expect that people may have opinions. So if you have any, send them to me.
All right. So we just did a few moments of agenda pruning before we kicked off the call. So we really only have one topic for today, and it's a bit of a surprise topic because just recently, as in like Friday. Yesterday. Igalia shared a really exciting project and announcement, and Brian is going to present on that. So I will hand it over to Brian.
Yeah, thank you. So like a lot of us, we wear different hats. So in addition to representing OpenJS Foundation and W3C, I work for Igalia, and what we do is we work on all the web browsers. They're all open source, and we work on them. We implemented like CSS Grid in WebKit and Chromium. We work on the JavaScript engines. We implemented like Big Int and class fields. But typically the investment in developing web standards, not creating web standards. Tons of companies participate in creating web standards, but all those words that they create new work that somebody has to do. And for most of the history of the web, that was locked up in the very few vendors. It was a very few number of people that would invest in that. Since they become open source, that's expanded a little bit. And what Igalia does is sort of that for hire. So there is a lot in the queue of web standards that is ultimately held up by trying to get priority from a very few number of companies. And that's why we're able to do what we do. And we thought that it would be really good if developers, just ordinary developers and groups of developers and companies could somehow find a way to discuss and pool their money and have a voice in how we advance, how we choose what to prioritize, basically. So Igalia has launched this open prioritization experiment, which we have chosen 6 for this initial run, 6 very carefully chosen things that we tried to balance in different browsers at different stages, different sizes of projects, although they're all considerably small in terms of scale. And what you can do is you can go and pledge to one of them as a pledged collective on Open Collective. And the first one that reaches its goal, Igalia promises we'll crowdfund that and implement it. And we will try our best to do as many as fund. But this is also a prioritization problem. It's very difficult to keep time for a thing you don't know how much work it will be. So we have to stay reasonable there. But we would like this experiment to help start a lot of really interesting and healthy discussions about how the web works and how the commons is funded and whether that's healthy and how we can all do better. So I think it's potentially really empowering and really exciting. And it could be a huge shift in the web, but we'll see. Does anybody on the call have any questions they want me to answer?
So
I think, oh, go ahead, Donovan.
Sorry, are you soliciting contributions of labor, money, and or both?
Well, it's open source, so you can contribute labor by just contributing to the open source. But I guess we hadn't considered a way to sort of co-organize that, but that's interesting feedback we can take back. Like I say, this is an experiment to begin discussions. I'm sure that if we carry it forward, which I expect we will, that we'll make tweaks and adjustments. But that's an interesting question. I hadn't thought of that.
Okay.
And then, Brian, I just wanted to clarify that the goal would be, to do all of the things on the list, because hopefully many of them get funded, but the plan is to do whichever one is funded first, and then if others are funded, you do those too.
Right. So
yeah.
So any of the vendors can take up those at any time as well. Any company can fund the work for any of those as a whole as well. So we can't predict in 6 months whether those will still be on the table. But if we see more than one funded, we'll do our best to get the person power available to get multiple of them done. I think we promise we'll do the first one absolutely for sure, and we'll try our best to do as many as fund. But we'll run it again if it works. So I think the goal is we need to get one to fund first before we talk about too much further. So it's just open-prioritization www.igalia.com. You can check it out.
And Brian, how do you spell Igalia?
Good question. Igalia.
Thank you.
The link is in the notes, so if anybody needs it.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool experiment. So in a prior incarnation of this, as part of, it could have been as part of the as part of the JS Foundation. I wrote a thing back in 2016 talking about how we need new ways to think about some of these things. So I'm really pleased to see something come together, and really great.
Do you see these are really heavy like HTML, CSS type projects? I mean, do you see maybe doing something similar for JavaScript at some point?
Oh yeah, no, we have actually, no, yeah, absolutely. We have items. Like I say, it was difficult to come up with a short list. We don't want a very long list initially. Is very difficult to come up with a very short list that balanced where the work is. In other words, like with some are CSS, some are HTML, as well as a diversity of browsers and a diversity of sizes. So if you have only 6 things, like it's difficult to choose a balance. So we didn't choose any JavaScript items this time, but we actually have some on a list for a future one that we can do, definitely. And if you have ideas for things, and you know of things that are just implementation priority problems that you would like to see implemented, definitely share them with us.
So looking at these issues, they're browser specific. Is that just because in each case this is the last browser that hasn't implemented a feature? It's the one that we need to get over the hump so that we can actually use it in our day-to-day lives?
So that is another thing that I was saying we tried to vary. So some of them are the last step, some of them are the second step.
Okay.
So that is an interesting, part of the idea, like I said, is to open the door for these really interesting conversations that we don't tend to think about because we're not the person organizing the priority for the browser implementations. But it's a hard choice, right? Because you might think, for example, one of them is really great, but it's only the second implementation, so it doesn't get you the thing necessarily. While maybe another one is the last implementation and it really gets you the thing. So even though maybe you might want it a little bit less, it has more value to you in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm excited to see this take off. It's pretty cool to see so many pledges already, and you just announced yesterday. So that's cool. I also think it's a very kind of interesting experiment in democratizing some of this in a way. So that's neat.
I think so too. I was really happy to connect with the Open Collective on that. So just thanks to Jory for connecting me with Open Collective on that, because that was very ideal. We align very closely.
That's cool. I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah.
So I think we definitely want to stay apprised of the project. And I think you're right. It's worth watching this and seeing, are there other things that we could do this with?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this was our only topic for today, and it's a fun one, so that's nice. Is there any other business that the group would like to bring before we close our call today? Nope. Okay. One thing that happened between now and last time we met was our blog post was published. Thank you, Rachel Romoff, who's off today, for getting that out. So you know, retweet, tell your friends. But other than that, we will see you all in 2 weeks for our next meeting.
Sounds great.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.